The round of 16 matchup between Germany and Algeria was truly one of the best matches of the 2014 World Cup, and despite Germany being heavy favorites, Algeria pushed them all the way to extra time and held on to the very end. At the 2014 World Cup, Germany was drawn into Group G. Aside from a crazy 2-2 draw with Ghana, Germany easily topped their group, obliterating Portugal 4-0 and comfortably beating the US 1-0. It was a very different story for Algeria in Group H though. While they actually opened the score against Belgium, they eventually succumbed to a 2-1 defeat, though they did bounce back with an emphatic 4-2 victory over South Korea. This meant everything rested on their final match against Russia. The Russians scored first early in the match and were playing well, yet Algeria were able to scrap a 1-1 draw after a very dubious set-piece goal late in the match, sending them to the knockout stage. Going into the match, Algeria's mediocre performance against Russia compared to Germany's run so far at this tournament, along with their illustrious history, meant no one really expected much from this Algerian side. But what actually occurred in the match was far from expectations, as the Desert Foxes put up an extremely valiant performance against the eventual world champions. In fact, throughout the first half, Algeria thoroughly outplayed the Germans. Islam Slimani was a constant threat up top, forcing Manuel Neuer into numerous quick decisions as he came out of goal, while Fazi Ghulam and Sofyan Feghouli sent in dangerous cross after dangerous cross. And when Germany did have chances, mostly shots from far out, Rais Moboli dealt with them easily. A substitution and formation change saw the Germans take relative control over the match in the second half, but at no point was Algeria truly down and out. They went toe-to-toe with Germany without faltering. Then came extra time as the match finished 0-0 in regulation. The deadlock was finally broken in style after the substitute Andre Schürrle backheeled in a deflected cross from Thomas Muller. The match then opened up from there, with both Germany and Algeria having several close chances to score. It would be the Germans who capitalized on their opportunities though, with a quick counterattack catching their opponents in transition. Mesut Ozil gathered the ball on the edge of the box, luring Moboli out of goal, before expertly laying the ball off to Schürrle, who was wide open in the middle. So the shot was actually heroically blocked on the line by Essayed Belkalem, but Ozil quickly reacted and blasted home the rebound. With Germany up 2-0 and the clock reading 118 minutes, it looked like the match was done and dusted. But before anyone could count them out, the Algerians burst into action at the other end of the pitch. With an absolutely wonderful cross from Feghouli and a powerful one-touch finish from Abdulmomen Diabou, Germany's lead had been cut in half in the 121st minute. And with only 1 minute of injury time left, the Algerians pushed for an equalizer, and they almost got it. A long ball and a failed clearance from Germany's Jerome Boateng saw Islam Slimani get control of the bouncing ball before heading it towards goal. Unfortunately for him, he was unable to generate much power and Neuer saved it with the match finishing 2-1. Algeria went home with their heads held high, while Germany professionally eliminated France in the quarterfinals before blowing away Brazil in the famous 7-1 semifinal, then doing just enough to overcome Argentina in the final to be crowned world champions. When looking at this particular round of 16 match, however, one could definitely make the argument that, besides, say, Argentina in the final, Algeria was the team who troubled Germany the most, certainly more than big teams like France, Brazil, or Portugal, for example. But when looking at this Algerian team, while they were not contenders for the title or anything like that, this was still a very talented squad with players like the aforementioned Feghouli, Ghulam, and Slimani, not to mention Yassine Brahimi, Issa Mandi, and even a young Riyad Mahrez. But what if Germany wasn't able to eliminate Algeria? What if Slimani's header in the 122nd minute found its way past Neuer and into the back of the net, tying the match 2-2 and sending it to a penalty shootout? Sure, Germany are notorious for their ruthlessness on penalties, you have to admit. But you would also have to admit that penalties can really go either way, and luck plays a large role in their outcome. Let's say, what if Rais Moboli, who was already having a wonderful game in Algeria's goal, saved at least one or two of the German penalties, and maybe one or two of the German defenders who walked up to take a penalty were suffering from cramps or fatigue after running around for 120 plus minutes, and as a result, Algeria shocked the world and eliminated Germany. Well, it is safe to say that the entire World Cup from that point on would have been completely changed as we drift into the realm of speculation. In our hypothetical universe where the Algerians marched on to the 2014 World Cup quarterfinals, their opponents would be France, and this is particularly interesting for reasons mostly outside of football and into politics. To put it lightly, France and Algeria have not had the friendliest relationship in the past. And to summarize it really briefly, Algeria had been a French territory for over a century, and following World War II, a brutal civil war was fought in which Algeria won their independence in 1962. This conflict was marred by mass killings, bloody guerrilla warfare, and a refugee crisis. Even today, French-Algerian relations remain rocky at best. These issues actually came to the forefront on the football pitch once before. In the early 2000s, France were the reigning world champions after their home victory in 1998, headlined by stars like Zinedine Zidane, who is of Algerian descent, Marcel Desailly, who is of Ghanaian descent, Patrick Vieira of Senegalese descent, and numerous other examples. This World Cup winning side was celebrated as a mirror of a modern, multi-ethnic France, one nation made up of many people of different ethnic backgrounds, but who are all united in their French identity, a prevailing concept that was widespread throughout the country at this time. While the 1998 World Cup victory may have represented a triumphant new France for many, some still felt very different. A glaring example of this was when France played Algeria in an international friendly in 2001. In October of that year, the French FA decided to host the first ever friendly match between the two nations. It was a political move as much as it was a sporting one, as the French wanted to reconcile with their past in many ways. This match, held in Paris, was supposed to be a gesture showing the improved relations between France and Algeria. Unfortunately, this did not end up as planned. On the pitch, France showed why they are the best team in the world at the time, scoring 3 easy goals from Vincent Candela, Emmanuel Petit, and Thierry Henry to make it 3-0 with the clock reading just 41 minutes. Jamel Belmadi did score a beautiful free kick to make it 3-1 just before halftime though. And while France did increase their lead with a goal from Robert Pires in the second half, all the media attention didn't go to the football being played on the pitch, but rather a completely separate incident. In the 77th minute, play was halted after a fan ran on the field. Just as the security guards were able to stop him, dozens more were out of the stands and onto the pitch, followed by more and more. Fights and brawls had been going on in the stands between French and Algerian fans the entire match, but now it had literally spilled onto the pitch. Some fans were even getting into skirmishes with the players. Amid all this chaos, the referee chose to abandon the match as he felt he had lost control of the situation. What was supposed to be a political demonstration to show how French-Algerian relations had improved ended up being a stark reminder that boiling hot tensions still remained. In fact, France has not played Algeria since that 2001 match to this day. But in our hypothetical timeline, all this controversy would arise again with the backdrop of the 2014 World Cup. There is no doubt that this matchup would cause some hostilities between the fans. Equivalent would be Israel and Palestine's national teams meeting each other at the World Cup, or say Albania and Serbia. Fan violence and misconduct already occurred on multiple occasions earlier on in this tournament. In 2 separate incidences, mass groups of Chilean fans and Argentinian fans forced their way into stadiums, damaging property. There was also a violent altercation between 2 English fans. In all these cases, the Brazilian military police cracked down hard, halting each incident far before it spiraled out of hand, and you could expect them to act similarly if a squabble erupted between French and Algerian supporters, especially if it leaked out onto the pitch. You could easily imagine a situation where a mass fight breaks out between fans, or a section of fans try to get on the field, resulting in a brutal crackdown by the Brazilian military police, possibly becoming an incident within itself. Riot police and emergency services will be on guard and ready to deploy, that is a definite. There's also the chance of this becoming an international incident if something truly bad did occur, possibly resulting in further military or geopolitical consequences outside of the sporting world. As for the football itself, it would be hard to see a reality where Algeria overcome the French and go to the semifinals. While true anything is possible in tournament football, Algeria would have just come off an extremely taxing affair, both mentally and physically, seeing off the Germans in both extra time and penalties, especially when you acknowledge the fact that majority of the players decided to fast in accordance with the Islamic holiday of Ramadan, which started only a few weeks prior. Meanwhile, this French team in 2014 was a good squad, but not a great one. It was an odd mixture of inexperienced but extremely talented young players who would eventually go on to do well at Euro 2016 and World Cup 2018, such as Antoine Griezmann, Raphael Varane, and Paul Pogba, along with leftovers of a previous generation that never really hit any highs, such as Matteo Debuchy, Matteo Valbuena, and Yohan Cabaye, not to mention several players in their prime or at least in very good form mixed in, such as Karim Benzema, Olivier Giroud, and Hugo Lloris. Unfortunately for the French, their star player and best attacker, Franck Ribéry, sustained a back injury and missed the tournament. So overall, France had a very capable squad, even if they weren't title contenders. And in light of the fatigue facing Algeria, it is hard to see past their World Cup journey ending here. They definitely would not go down without a fight, however, and the added political atmosphere would have made this match a tense affair. But when you look at Algeria's World Cup run thus far, one major weakness they had was defending headers or high crosses, which many of their goals they conceded originated from. Compare that to France, who were particularly deadly in the air, with aerial threats like Giroud, Benzema, and Pogba. Since the match in real life was decided by a wonderfully taken header by Mats Hummels, let's say that France narrowly overcome Algeria 1-0 following a Raphael Varane header off a set piece in our hypothetical universe. Elsewhere in the World Cup, everything else goes the same. Argentina sees off Belgium to meet Netherlands in the semifinals, who themselves just defeated Costa Rica on penalties. France's semifinal opponent would be Brazil, who just eliminated Colombia in what would turn out to be a Pyrrhic victory. No doubt the most shocking and memorable moment of the 2014 World Cup was Brazil's 7-1 humiliation at the hands of the Germans, but now it is France facing the host nations instead. Does the 7-1 still occur? I would say no. The Brazilian team's collapse wasn't totally the work of Germany, but a large part of it was. Germany's ruthless counterattack and machine-like lack of mercy was the complete opposite of Brazil's inexperience and emotional fragility. Germany was the most well-organized and well-rounded team at this World Cup, and it showed in the semifinals. While France definitely had talent, they lacked the brutality as well as having much inexperience themselves. Many of the talented young players were playing their first ever international tournament, while the older players mostly came from a French generation that, for the most part, failed on the international stage, with an embarrassing group stage exit in Euro 2008, an even more catastrophic group stage embarrassment in World Cup 2010, and a meek exit in the quarterfinals of Euro 2012. So overall, this French side had potential for the future, but was far from reaching it just yet. The lack of rivalry was very impactful as well, and this can very well be seen in France's run at the 2014 World Cup. They made light work of Honduras and even gained a 5-goal lead over Switzerland in the next match, but a lapse in concentration saw them concede 2 late goals. They finished off their group stage with a drab 0-0 draw with Ecuador before easily defeating a Nigeria side who were lucky to be in the knockout stage, quite frankly. However, when they went up against a serious team like Germany, they looked out of depth. So in the semifinals in our hypothetical universe, Brazil continues to do what they had been doing throughout the rest of the tournament, not playing particularly well, but doing just enough to scrape a win, usually relying on their biggest stars. Without Neymar due to injury and Thiago Silva from yellow card accumulation, this would be extremely hard, but remember, France does not have the same capacity to capitalize on Brazil's weaknesses as Germany did. The pressure of being the home nation is heavy enough to provide positive motivation, but not too overbearing to push them over the edge, not yet at least. In this path, France would take the lead through Karim Benzema after a counterattack pounced on a Brazilian defensive mishap, only for Brazil to equalize late in the second half with a goal from Hulk, who is now the focal point of the attack. Neither side can break the deadlock from here, and it goes to penalties. Julio Cesar, in Brazil's goal, who had already saved his nation in the round of 16 penalty shootout against Chile, repeats his success here and sends Brazil to the final. From here on, the boiling pressure that became too much to bear against Germany in the 7-1 match would come crashing down in the final as Brazil faced their biggest rival, Argentina, still without Neymar nonetheless. In reality, Argentina outplayed Germany in the final, but their lack of clinical finishing became their downfall. That wouldn't be the case against Brazil, who would be falling apart due to the home pressure and fear of a repeat of the 1950 World Cup final disgrace. The crudely put together defense of Marcelo, David Luiz, Thiago Silva, and Maicon would be no match for Lionel Messi, Ezequiel Lavezzi, and Gonzalo Higuain. Throughout Argentina's World Cup run, the luck of the draw saw them go up against teams with either strong defenses or teams that were willing to take a defensive and conservative approach, such as Belgium, Netherlands, and even Germany to a certain extent. This was one of the reasons that Argentina only scored 8 goals the entire World Cup and only 2 in the knockout stage. However, against Brazil, this would not be the case, as Argentina's attack would run riot over this fragile Brazilian team. With an embarrassment of catastrophic proportions, Argentina annihilates Brazil 5-0 in the final to win the World Cup for only the third time in history and ending a trophy drought for the Argentinian national team dating back to the 1993 Copa America. So in the end, if Algeria had in fact defeated Germany at the 2014 World Cup, history would have been forever changed. Not only would Algeria have been only the fourth African team to make it as far as the quarterfinals, but Germany's elimination would also mean someone else would obviously become champions. A France versus Algeria quarterfinal would cause political controversy and maybe more serious global implications, while on the pitch, France would advance to the semifinals. In place of Germany, France playing Brazil would mean no 7-1 and would also see Brazil make it to the final, which would ultimately end in an Argentine victory. So, in our hypothetical universe, the 2014 World Cup would look completely different than in our reality, all stemming from that one changed variable.